Welcome to our deep dive into Ready for Anything by David Allen. I think this one's going to be particularly useful for our listeners.
Oh, yeah. This is
Yeah.
one of those books that just really, um, yeah, I think it can make a huge difference for people who are feeling that sense of overwhelm.
Yeah,
Just like,
totally. Like you're constantly treading water, just trying to keep up with everything. Like there's always more to do than you could
yeah,
possibly.
exactly. And what I really appreciate about Alan's approach is it's not just about like getting more done or,
Yeah, it's not just about productivity hacks or like
yeah, it's about
it's
really shifting your mindset.
yeah, and finding that sense of calm, like he talks about the mind like water, and that's something that really resonated with me. Like how water just responds effortlessly to anything that comes its way.
It's such a powerful analogy, because water can be both like incredibly powerful and incredibly peaceful at the same time.
It's adaptable.
Exactly. It adapts to whatever container it's in.
Yeah.
It flows around obstacles.
And it always finds its level.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we cultivate uh, that kind of mental state where we're not constantly feeling like we're battling the current, you know?
Right, like how do we become more responsive instead of reactive?
And I think one of the keys that Alan emphasizes is this idea of capturing all of your open loops.
Open loops.
Yeah, he uses this term to refer to anything that's kind of like taking up space in your mental RAM.
Oh, I like that mental RAM.
Yeah, it's like all those, those to-dos, those ideas, those
Mm.
nagging little things that, you need to take care of, but they're just kind of floating around in the back of your mind.
Like that thing you keep meaning to get at the store.
Exactly. Or, like that email you need to respond to.
Or like that project you keep putting off.
All of that stuff is taking up space in your mental RAM, whether you're consciously aware of it or not.
And I think a lot of people underestimate how much that mental clutter actually affects them.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Because it's like you're trying to run a computer with like a million tabs open in the background.
It slows everything down.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes it harder to focus on what you're actually trying to do.
So what does Alan suggest we do about it? Like, how do we actually capture those open loops?
Well, he talks about the importance of having a system that you trust a system for getting those things out of your head and onto paper or into a digital tool or whatever works for you.
Okay, so it's not just about like writing things down, it's about having a system that you actually use and rely on.
Exactly. And he tells this great story about working with a client who was completely overwhelmed by his email inbox. He had
Hmm.
like hundreds of unread messages. And it was just causing him so much stress.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah, we all been there, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And so Alan had him do this really radical experiment, which was to just clear out his entire inbox.
Like delete every.
Now, not delete, just move every single email out of the inbox and into a temporary folder.
Oh, wow, just to get it out of sight?
Yeah, just to like create that
Hmm.
that sense of space. And the client was amazed by how much relief he felt just from seeing an empty inbox.
Hmm. I can imagine. Like, even if you haven't actually built with the emails yet, just getting them out of your immediate field of vision can make a huge difference.
It's like you're clearing the decks,
Mm.
and it allows you to actually see the full scope of what you're dealing with.
And then you can start to prioritize and make decisions about what to tackle first.
Exactly. And that's really the first step toward achieving that mind-like water state.
Because it's hard to be calm and responsive when you're feeling like you're drowning in a sea of unfinished tasks.
It's about creating that space, both mentally and physically, for clarity and focus to emerge.
So, for our listeners out there who are maybe feeling a little overwhelmed right now, what would you say is like the one takeaway from this part of our deep dive?
If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them.
Ooh, I like that.
Get those open loops out of your head and into a system you trust. You'll be amazed by how much lighter you feel and how much more you can accomplish.
It's like taking a deep breath and finally being able to relax. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you personally do to capture those open loops? Like what systems have you found that work for you?
Well, for me, it's a combination of things.
I use a physical notebook sometimes just to jot down thoughts and ideas. And then I also have a digital task manager that I use for more specific to-dos.
Yeah, I'm similar. I love the feeling of physically writing things down.
Yeah.
It helps me to kind of process them better. But then, yeah, I also rely on digital tools for keeping track of everything.
So once you've captured all those open loops, like what's the next step in this whole mind like water process?
Well, it's not enough just to clear the decks.
Hmm.
You also have to be intentional about what you choose to focus on.
Right, because if you're not careful, you can just end up filling that space back up with more clutter.
Exactly. And that's where Alan's ideas about focusing productively come in.
So it's not just about doing things, it's about doing the right things.
Precisely. And he emphasizes the importance of aligning your actions with your values and your goals.
Because otherwise, you're just going to end up feeling scattered and unfulfilled.
Right. It's like you're running in circles, but you're not actually getting anywhere.
So how do we make sure that we're focusing on the things that actually matter?
Well, Alan talks about the power of visualization, and he tells this amazing story about finding an old mind map that he'd created when he was just 10 years old.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story. It's like he basically laid out his ideal life on this mind map.
Exactly. And years later, he realized that so much of what he'd envisioned as a child had actually come true.
It's like he subconsciously guided his choices based on that early vision.
Wild, isn't it?
Yeah, it really makes you think about the power of our thoughts and beliefs.
Absolutely. And it also highlights the importance of being clear about what we want.
Right, because if we don't know what we're aiming for, how can we possibly hit the target?
Exactly. And Alan also acknowledged that even with a clear vision in mind, it's still easy to get distracted and lose focus.
Oh, yeah, I struggle with that all the time. Like, there are always so many things competing for our attention.
Right. And that's where he introduces this technique that he calls putting things in front of the door.
Putting things in front of the door. What does he mean by that?
Well, it's about creating visual cues or reminders that help you stay focused on what matters most.
So it's like literally putting a physical object in your way to remind you of something?
Sometimes, yeah, like if there's something important that you need to take care of, he suggests, like literally putting it in front of your door so you can't leave without seeing it.
Okay, I can see how that would be effective.
But it can also be more metaphorical, like setting a reminder on your phone or putting a sticky note on your computer screen.
It's about proactively directing your attention instead of letting it get pulled in a million different directions.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that our environment plays a huge role in shaping our thoughts and behaviors.
So if we want to be more focused and productive, we need to create an environment that supports those goals.
Exactly. It's about setting ourselves up for success.
So I'm starting to see a theme here, like all of these ideas are interconnected. You can't focus productively if your mind is cluttered with open loops, but you also need a clear vision of what you're working towards, and then you need to create an environment that supports those goals.
It's like building a house.
Yeah.
You need a solid foundation, a clear blueprint, and then you can start putting the pieces together.
Okay, but what about those of us who aren't naturally organized? I've tried different systems in the past, but they always end up feeling too rigid or complicated.
I hear you. And there's this common misconception that being organized stifles creativity.
Yeah, like you have to be a certain type of person to be organized.
Right. But Alan actually argues the opposite.
Yeah.
He believes that having systems in place frees up your mental energy for more creative pursuits.
It's like that saying, a tidy desk equals a tidy mind.
Exactly. It's about creating space, both physically and mentally, for those creative breakthroughs to emerge.
I can relate to that. Sometimes when I'm feeling stuck, I'll tidy up my workspace or go for a walk. And it's amazing how often that helps me get unstuck. It's like clearing out the cobwebs, both literally and figuratively.
It's about recognizing that sometimes the most mundane tasks can actually fuel our creativity.
Yeah.
And Alan even has this idea of having an internal visionary and doer, each with its own role and system to work within.
So it's like having different parts of yourself working together.
Exactly. Your visionary is the part that dreams big, sets goals, and comes up with new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And then your doer is the part that takes those ideas and makes them happen.
Hmm.
But for this to work effectively, you need systems that are better than your mind systems that you can trust to keep track of everything.
Okay, I see what you mean. If I'm constantly trying to remember everything in my head, it's no wonder I feel overwhelmed. But what makes a system better than your mind? What does that actually look like?
Well, think about it this way. Think about how we use a calendar, right? Like you put all your appointments in there, and then you trust that the calendar will remind you. So you don't have to, keep it all in your head.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the same principle with any system. It has to be reliable, accessible, and it has to capture everything that you need to remember.
Okay, so it's about freeing up mental space by offloading that information to a system that we trust.
Exactly. And then once you have that system in place, you can start to focus on actually getting things done.
Which is often easier said than done, right? Like, even with a great system, I still find myself struggling with procrastination and overwhelm sometimes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's where Alan's ideas about mastering the art of motion come in.
Mastering the art of motion. That sounds kind of like a martial arts movie or something.
Well, it's not quite as dramatic as that, but it is about moving forward with purpose and intention.
Okay, I like that.
And one of the key concepts here is that you don't actually have time to do any project.
Wait, what?
You only have time to do action steps.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So it's about breaking things down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Exactly. And then focusing on the next right action.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed by this huge project, I should just ask myself, what's the one thing I can do right now to move this forward?
Precisely. It's about shifting your perspective from feeling overwhelmed by the whole to feeling empowered by the parts.
I like that. And it kind of reminds me of something else Alan talks about, which is shifting your measure of progress.
Oh yeah, from the number of tasks you complete to the percentage of better choices you make.
Yes, it's not about mindlessly checking things off a list. It's about making conscious decisions that align with your values and goals.
And Alan talks about how he used to get so caught up in trying to do everything perfectly,
Hmm.
and he realized that it was actually holding him back.
So he started focusing on making better choices throughout the day.
Exactly. Even if he didn't accomplish everything on his list, if he made a higher percentage of better choices, he considered it a successful day.
That's such a great reframing because it takes the pressure off having to be perfect.
It's about progress, not perfection, and recognizing that setbacks are inevitable.
And speaking of setbacks, Alan also uses this analogy of playing games you can win.
Oh yeah, it's about choosing your battles wisely, you know?
Mhm.
Not every challenge is worth our time and energy.
So we need to be strategic in deciding where to focus our efforts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And be willing to lose as much as needed along the way.
Knowing that those losses are actually opportunities for learning and growth.
Absolutely. It's all part of the process.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ready for Anything, what are some of the key takeaways that have really stuck with you?
For me, it's that idea of the mind like water.
Mm.
Cultivating that sense of calm responsiveness, even in the midst of chaos. And it starts with capturing those open loops, having systems in place that you trust, and then focusing your energy on making better choices one step at a time.
I love that. And I think what's really resonated with me is that this isn't just about productivity. It's about living a more fulfilling and intentional life. It's
Yeah.
about having the clarity and focus to pursue the things that truly matter to you.
And that makes me wonder, given that discomfort often precedes growth, how can we intentionally create healthy discomfort in our lives to unlock new possibilities?
Ooh, that's a great question to leave our listeners with. It's definitely something I'm going to be pondering myself. And for everyone listening, I highly recommend checking out Ready for Anything for yourselves. It's packed with insights and practical advice that can help you navigate the complexities of life with more ease and clarity.
And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. So keep experimenting, keep learning, and most importantly, keep sharing your insights. We're all in this together.
That's it for our deep dive into Ready for Anything. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration. Until then, stay curious and keep striving for that mind like water.